Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Eco Chat episode. I'm going to apologise in advance. I'm full of cold, so if I fall over my words, that's why. But we are here today to discuss compost. I'm joined by a Yorkshire famous guy. I think John's quite well known all over the country actually, but he is known as Compost John, and he is going to tell us a little bit about his green lifestyle and how that started, and then we're going to chat about the basics of compost, how to start and why it's good, and we'll go a little bit in depth so that people who have some knowledge will hopefully get some hints and tips as well. So John, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your lifestyle and how that started?
Oh, where did it start, Jen? I don't know. I was a bit of a kind of a nature boy when I was a lad. I used to collect insects and pin them, and I used to. I was interested in skulls and that kind of thing, and rocks and fossils, all sorts of things. I was really interested in nature in its widest forms, I had I went to college when I was 18 and had a psychedelic epiphany by accident, really.
Okay.
I had a lot of magic mushrooms, and that completely made me feel connected with the universe. Instead of being a geeky, autistic kid that memorized Latin names, and studied nature, I felt I was nature, and I felt really at one with the world, and I knew that I had to live my life in a different way to my parents. And I immediately, well, within a short time, went vegetarian. And I started to, instead of buying stuff, I'd find stuff in skips and bins. This is in the 80s, 1984 was when this happened. And then I dropped out, didn't complete that degree, went back into education.
What was your degree in?
Initially, I was going to be a teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'm a good communicator, and my parents could see that.
Lucky escape, maybe.
Possibly, but I actually fell back into teaching. I'll tell you in a minute. So I went back into education in 1991, and on paper, the idea of being an environmental health officer ticked all the boxes. So I did an environmental health degree, 91 to 95, which included doing my dissertation on composting, which we're going to come back to. But the other thing that happened is I discovered circus skills when I went to a festival, and I started getting really addicted to circus skills and trying out all sorts of new tricks and skills. And I started practicing on the street, and I put a hat out to get money, and then people started to try and book me to go places and do it for them. So I started being Professor Fiddlesticks. Excellent. And that's my other name. I'm a kids entertainer.
What these years on. Compost John and Professor Fiddlesticks.
Who needs to be called John Cossham? These other monikers. So I work as a kids entertainer, but I also am very, very much into living a green lifestyle. And in fact, in 2008, I entered a competition run by Oxfam to find the person with the lowest carbon footprint in the UK. And I won that.
Wow.
The second person had double my footprint. Oxfam didn't believe me at first, but we went through the calculator a couple of times. I'm just very, very anal about carbon.
And where did that start? Sort of what made you think I need to, was it just a passion for it, or because obviously the climate crisis has been around for a very long time, but it's only really been in the public eye and interest for the last few years, and it's kind of really picked up its pace and people are starting to make those changes, but you've been doing it a lot longer than that. So what was it that triggered you?
Oh, the mushrooms.
Just the mushrooms.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was that connected everything together. Because I might have got there anyway, but it made it real. It made it, I felt like the molecules in my body were the same as the molecules in that rock and that horse and that cloud and the stars in the sky. and it was just so real for me. It's a real epiphany. And now, of course, psilocybin, the active ingredient, is being used to help people recover from addiction, depression, PTSD. It really
Yeah.
is a fantastic substance. I'm not advocating it, of
No,
course,
but yeah,
but
it's
it
got
certainly, if you
its
want to
uses.
research it, it's a very interesting, and many people who have had this experience often go on to explore creativity, working with animals, looking after people in a very empathic, kind way.
Yeah.
Very few people become dictators and tyrants.
So can you give us sort of your completely different, moving on from that, but your top tips for lowering carbon footprint? It's something that I've been trying to do for a while, but I know I've read a little bit, and you don't fly anymore, and you only cycle and use trains. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which are obviously quite big things that a lot of people can't or won't give up. So what are sort of more day-to-day things that you think people can do to lower that impact, that
The
carbon
very biggest thing that you can do to lower your individual carbon footprint is not have children.
footprint?
The the
Yeah.
uh, the the next thing, if you've already got children like I have two officially. I You can split our individual carbon footprint into 3 or 4 main areas. There's your home heating and energy. So of course
Okay.
you can go onto a green tariff like Good Energy. So the electricity, which I'm using right now on the laptop and the light, that comes from wind farms and solar panels, including my own solar panels.
Excellent.
Um, and heating, I use wood burners. I've got 2 smoke-free wood burners, which are very clean, don't give out very many particulates. But I also have a hot water panel on the roof. That means
Oh, okay.
the water I use to wash my body is warmed by the sun. And you don't need a solar panel on your roof to get green energy. Go to Good Energy or one of the
Yeah.
other suppliers, and it might be a different price to Dirty Energy, but I'd rather pay
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
the next thing is diet.
Okay.
Your diet is a massive part of your footprint, and meat. So an average person in the UK eats meat, and meat forms a very, very big proportion of an average
Yeah.
person's carbon footprint. Meat and dairy. If you can do a meat-free Monday, that's really good.
Yeah.
If you can, I believe Prince Charles has said he doesn't eat meat twice a week and doesn't eat dairy 1 day a week. That's a good start.
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, 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 so if you can buy local, in season, and with minimal packaging,
Yeah.
that's great. And obviously a vegan lifestyle with just local produce is limited, but your very lowest carbon footprint.
Yeah.
The next thing is travel. The number one thing that you can do to damage the climate in the shortest possible way is, apart from setting fire to a forest, is flying. Flying gives out many tons of carbon for a very short space of time. And when people say, well, flying is the same carbon footprint as driving a car per mile, I said, but when did you last drive to New York? Or when did
Yes.
you last drive to Vienna? The fact is that we travel long distances in planes, and we need to ration that. We need to. I mean, I've given up. I stopped flying in '97. Just felt really guilty doing it. I took a flight in '97.
Okay.
Looked into doing it by plane. Couldn't do that with a small child. So I went by plane, and it was just on my conscience. So I gave up, and life has been better ever since.
Do you miss traveling?
I don't miss traveling because I continue to travel. I travel all over the UK by train if I need to. I've just been down to the West Country to have a short visit, 4.5 hours from York.
Yeah. And what about sort of things like the Eurostar? Would you take that over to France and maybe travel
Well,
that
if I
way?
had a passport, I would, yeah. If
Yeah.
there's something over there that I wanted to do. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can now get a train all the way to Amsterdam.
Yeah, yeah, you can do a lot of mainland Europe on trains now, can't you? So
Yeah,
I
there's
guess it's
a really good
the
website
time, isn't it,
called
that people.
there's
Go
a
on.
good website called pardon me, Seat 61, or the
Okay.
man in Seat 61. They give you rail timetables all over the world.
Oh wow. Oh, that's a good one for
You
people
can
looking.
plan a journey from York to Peking, or
Wow.
Beijing, sorry,
Wow.
and you can see the connections, and the website will do
Excellent.
it.
How exciting. Fantastic. Right, let's dig into your speciality, compost. So we, like I said before, we're going to start the very basics. So for somebody who has never composted anything before in their life and doesn't really know what it is or understand it or why it's good, can you give us a very basic outline?
Yeah, nature composts. When a leaf falls off a tree, or a squirrel defecates, or a bird flies and drops dead in midair, the materials, those items fall on the ground, and bacteria and fungi and other organisms take that material apart. They use it as food, and it all eventually goes into the soil, a material called humus, organic materials in soil. And organic, I'm talking about carbon containing, not some fancy food that's overpriced. So basically, all you need to do with anything that's ever lived or grown recently, anything from an animal or plant will compost, is to put it tidily, because we don't like littering things all over the garden, in a compost bin or a pile, and give it the right conditions to decompose with bacteria and fungi. And all it needs is oxygen from the air,
Yeah.
moisture, and time. You need a good mix of materials as well if you're putting lots of things together.
Okay.
And really that's what it is. It's good because it stops things going to landfill or the incinerator. It completes the cycle of things growing from the soil and then going back to the soil, so it completes the loop. It adds nutrients to the soil, because compost has nutrients that were in the food or in the food waste or in the manure or whatever it was. It reduces the amount of transport, because you take it down the garden in a caddy or whatever, rather than it being driven somewhere, or like green bin. People put materials in the green bin, or whatever colour it is, has to be driven somewhere. The council shreds it with a big diesel shredder, and then manages their big compost heaps with big diesel vehicles. You don't need to do that in your garden. The pitchfork will do.
So
and it's good for wildlife too. Just quickly, it's good for biodiversity, because all those animals in the compost, the woodlice and worms and beetles, they get eaten by birds and frogs and things. It's just really good.
Yeah, my kids love finding the worms in the garden. It's one of their favourite things to do at the moment. And because I've told them that worms mean that the soil's healthy and the soil's good, and explained how worms help the soil. So they think it's fantastic. And we're going to have like giant carrots. Well, it's not quite how it works. It just means that the carrots will be better because the worms are helping. But cool. So you said having a good mixture of things in your compost bin. So what is a good mix, and what things should you avoid putting in a compost bin?
Okay, a good, when composters, geeky composters, talk about things, they talk about carbon rich or nitrogen rich, or they talk about browns and greens. They talk about structural and putrescible. All this means is that the items that you put into your compost have a mixture of carbon and nitrogen, and some things have a very high proportion of carbon, like paper, cardboard, wood chips, twigs, sawdust, and other things have a very high proportion of nitrogen, like fruit and veg, urine, grass clippings. Those are high nitrogen. So and the nitrogen materials, when they break down with the bacteria, which go for them very quickly, they collapse into a soggy mess. So if you have some structural carbon rich materials like twigs, it enables the oxygen to get in, the CO2 to get out, the water vapor to get out, provides channels for the woodlice and worms and the other organisms to get through. So having that mixture of garden waste or wood chips, sawdust, cardboard boxes, and the food waste is really good. The things you can avoid, if you've got an open heap or a heap that rodents can get into easily because it's just based on the soil, you might want to avoid cooked food or meat. But cooked food and meat and dairy and oils will compost just as well as any other material given the right conditions. So I have tumblers which are enclosed, and I put any meat and dairy and cooked food in those, and I tumble for a fortnight, turn it every day, and then I put it in another heap to mature for a year.
Yeah, because I use a Bokashi bin, so we put all of our food waste in there, and that sort of starts off the process. So we can put.
You know what that does?
Go on. I do vaguely, but tell me more.
Well, Bokashi it's a Japanese effective microorganism culture, and what it is, it's a group of bacteria which will feast on the meat and oils and cooked food and anything you put in there. But it's an anaerobic process, so you press it down, it excludes the air, and it produces lactic acid, which is the same acid which is produced in our muscles when we get cramp, when we're not giving enough oxygen. And the lactic acid decreases the pH, so it becomes acidic, and the stuff breaks down, but it doesn't break down in the same way as compost. What you can do is, when it's been in the Bokashi bin for a while and it's gone thoroughly acidic, it then it isn't as palatable to rodents, and so you can put it in a compost heap, break up the lump, and then it becomes aerobic again, and the pH rises because compost is naturally slightly alkaline, and the material breaks down really quickly. So it's a fermentation, and it's a preparation for composting stuff that you can't put on an open heap because it's rat friendly.
There you go. So we use that and then put it all in our outdoor compost bin as well. So I've got, in terms of, you mentioned turning compost, this is something that I do not do, and I'm terrible at, and I know that it's probably something that I really need to get into the habit of, but we've got one of the yucky plastic compost bins in the corner of our garden.
You're not talking about a Dalek, are you?
Yeah.
They're not yucky. They're the best compost bin that you can get.
Oh, are they? Okay, so
they're absolutely brilliant.
So it's quite full. We've put all sorts of things in there: food waste, grass cuttings. I've recently cut all the leaves off my tomato plants, so they're in there. And how do I turn that, and how often do I need to be turning that compost?
Okay, there's lots of different answers to this. Firstly, you don't need to turn it because it will turn into compost eventually. Some people attempt to get down on all fours and scoop stuff out of the door at the bottom. I wouldn't bother. What I would do is, when it's full, and I always recommend having 2 Daleks next to each other if you've got the space, or 2 compost bins, 2 compost bays, whatever it is, because you fill one up, and when it's full, put the lid on and forget about it. And then fill the second one up, and when the second one's full, the first one will have rotted down to a half or a third of what it was, and be ready to use. Alternatively, a little bit more work and a better result is, when Dalek number 1 is full, you then turf it out and put it, using a fork or your hands, into the second one, and that breaks up any layers that have got mixed stuck together, excluding air, and mixes materials up. And you then fill the empty bin with the material that was in the first one. At the bottom, it'll be almost done, it'll be almost finished. And then you continue filling the bin that you were already putting stuff in. It might be in a more convenient place. If you've only got one bin, what you can do is, and you do this with ordinary wormeries, not the stacking wormeries, you take out the top third, put it on a tarp or in a wheelbarrow. That's got all the worms in it. It'll have slimy stuff in. It'll have the stuff that's actively composting. And then in a separate area, take out the bottom 2/3, which will be more or less finished.
Yeah.
And you can either put those to mature in sacks or just leave it on a tarp, although the birds will go nuts for it. They'll flick it around everywhere, searching for food. Really good. And then you put that top third working stuff back in the base.
Okay.
That works for wormeries as well. The original organic wormeries, the junior wormery, which is like a box with a false bottom, and you just pile the stuff in.
Yeah.
The stacking wormeries, you don't need to do that.
Okay.
You just take the bottom tray out. So you move trays 1, 2, and 3, and tray 4, the bottom one. You take it out, tip it in, and you put the now empty tray on the top, and the worms move up from the tray, which is now number 2 with all the working stuff in, into the top tray. So wormeries are like a compost heap in a box.
Yes. Yeah. A friend's got a.
You can have those on your balcony. You can have it in your garage.
That was going to be one of my next questions, actually. So the people that don't have a garden or don't have a garden that's big enough for a compost bin, what are their options if they want to sort of start composting things?
If they want to start home composting, a wormery is a good thing. And of course, there's always people who will be happy to take your compost.
Okay.
It might not strictly be within the letter of the law, but if you talk to a gardener friend or somebody's got an allotment and say, would you like some finished compost? They'll happily take it for you. You could use some in your house plants if you've just got indoor plants, but usually there's a hedge nearby that you can put stuff under, or a tree in the local park, sprinkle some on that.
So if they just have their food waste there and they don't have access to actually compost the materials to start with, and they want to get rid of their food waste in a better way rather than just putting it in a landfill, what could they do?
Lobby your council to start a food waste collection scheme, which will be being brought in by law fairly soon. I don't know.
That's good news.
Well, yeah, I think it is, but it still means things being driven around.
It does.
There's also a scheme called Share Waste. There's a website called Share Waste, where you can look on that, and you'll find somebody in your local area who will accept your compost, and you make an arrangement with them. So because my composting is a business, anybody that uses me, I ask them to make a small donation. I bring 100 kilos of food waste in every week. So when I go down the garden with a 20 kilo sack of waste fruit and veg from the local greengrocers, I can put that on a nice thick layer on my heap, put some shredded hedge on top, and I've got a nice heap. When I'm taking somebody's little bag from the kitchen, having to take tea bags out because they're not biodegradable, that's a bit of effort for me, and I'm getting a very small amount of compostable material. And I explain that to people. I will compost your materials as a service. And if you can do a pay as you feel, I do everything by pay as you feel, then that would be nice. Sometimes somebody will give me a jar of chutney or lemon curd. That's
excellent. Good always nice to have a bit of home produce.
Bit of barter. Avoiding use of money, because money is one of the ungreen things. Money is a very complicated subject, but it's not all good.
No, it's there's too much of it.
Did you ask about did you want to know about using compost?
I've got 2 more questions about what you can put in your compost bin. So the first one is animal waste. So we have a dog. Can I put that in my compost bin?
They can get a dog poo wormery. If your compost bin gets hot, you can put it in the center of that, and the heat will destroy any worms in there, any parasitic worms or any toxicara organisms. But you can get a dog poo wormery. You could use something called a green cone, which you just put the stuff into and it goes into the soil. I mean, dog and cat manure can be composted. I have a compost toilet for my own manure. All manure can be composted, with one exception, which is herbivores which are fed on pasture which has had a weed killer put on it called aminopyrrolid, which kills broadleaf plants. And this or hay, so guinea pigs that are fed hay, cheap hay, will have the field will have come from a hay field which may have had aminopyrrolid spread on it,
Right.
and
Okay.
this kills thistles and docks and millet, but the hay retains the aminopyrrolid, the weed killer. It
Right.
goes through the animal, and then your compost will then kill plants. And allotment holders know about this very well with horse manure. So you can do a test on compost that's got this in by planting a bean in it, and if when it's got past the first two leaves, if the rest of the plant becomes twisted and yellow and unwell looking, you
Yeah.
know that the batch of compost is contaminated with aminopyrrolid, and you need to talk to the compost supplier or the hay supplier, the manure supplier.
Yeah.
Farmers aren't allowed to get rid of manure off farms that have been using aminopyrrolid, but of course farmers often want a quick buck, and if
Yeah.
they can sell a load of manure for 30 quid, they will probably do that.
Yeah.
Even
Absolutely.
though it's
Fantastic. Okay.
not within the law.
The other one I wanted to ask was, there's a lot of compostable bags around now. I knew that would be your reaction, but it's very misleading, and I think it comes up a lot. Can I put this in my compost? Is it industrial compost or home compost? So can you tell us a bit more about those and how that works?
Yeah, there are some compostable plastics, the ones made of cornstarch, which have got a funny feel to them.
Yeah,
kind
they're
of
crinkly
silky.
almost, aren't they?
They will break down pretty quickly. You know, within a week of having compostable materials
Okay.
in it, they'll sometimes start to break down. They will decay reasonably quickly in compost, although when you riddle the compost, when you come to use it, you may find shreds of this plastic still in it, which then should go back in the next heap. However, there is a form of plastic called PLA, or vegware, which is not compostable in home heaps.
Right.
Vegware, I'm afraid they say, well, this is not plastic because it's made of starch. It's made of polymerized lactic acid, which comes from potatoes or corn, sweet
Right.
corn, that kind of thing. But it is plastic. It's just made from a different carbon source,
Okay.
and it will only compost in industrial composting and hot composts for a long time. And it's a bit of a nuisance because sometimes it ends up in the plastic waste stream, and the optical sorters for plastic recycling can't always recognize it, so
Right.
it contaminates other plastic. So there are so many different sorts of plastic, it's a real nuisance. And my recommendation is, if you can reduce the amount of plastic that you use,
Yeah.
and use reusable, so if you've got a Tupperware tub that you've
Yeah.
had since your granny gave it to you 23 years ago, use
Yeah.
that. Take it into your food retailer. So I've got a zero waste shop near me.
Yeah.
If I take my muesli tub in, they say, what are you getting? And I'll say organic deluxe muesli. They put the tub on the scales. They write down on a piece of paper that's 17 pence.
Yeah.
I then go and fill it up. They weigh the whole thing. They tot up the money,
Yeah.
and they take 17 pence off my bill, and I pay them.
Yeah. So
How
do
cool is
you,
that?
my last eco chat was with Kat from the Little Green Way in York.
I know her.
Yeah. So the last episode was all about zero waste shopping and how to zero waste shop. So exactly that, taking a container, or they have paper bags, and getting rid of that packaging, the excess.
And the greenest thing, of course, is not to consume it if you don't need it.
Absolutely.
On the top of the pyramid is refuse.
Yeah.
Buy less.
Yeah.
Reduce. So eat smaller meals. And here's me with a fat tummy. I'm a vegan, you see, so I eat a lot of food waste. I eat a lot of. I just found a pumpkin in one of the bags of food waste I've reclaimed. It had a bit of mold on one side. 3/4 of the pumpkin is absolutely fine.
Yeah, and this is the issue, isn't it? Is that a lot of people think can't have that. It just cut the bad bit off and you'd be good to go. Right, last point then, because we've been chatting a while. So what do you do with compost when it is ready? So how long does it take roughly to be ready, and what do you do with it when it is ready? And then we'll call it.
Some people claim you can make compost in a fortnight and stuff, but you can't. Compost is a thing that takes a year or more. And the compost I sell as Compost John is usually about 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
And basically it needs that time for the wood to rot down, for the fungi to digest the wood. It takes a long time. When you've got whatever type of finished compost you feel is finished, my recommendation is to top dress your land, whether that land be a pot of something nice in your windowsill, or raised beds, or ordinary garden. Top dress, don't dig. Digging damages soil structure, harms soil wildlife. Look to Charles Dowding on YouTube for no dig. He's really good. He'll explain why no dig is best, and I recommend no dig if you can. That doesn't mean you never put anything in the soil. I excavate a hole to plant my squash seedlings.
Yes.
But I don't dig the whole bed to put potatoes in. I just don't do it.
Yeah.
You can also mix compost with other materials. So I make leaf mold, which is just autumn leaves composted by itself.
Okay.
And leaf mold, it replaces peat. So you don't need to buy a peat-based compost. You can mix leaf mold with loam, which is basically sieved garden soil. And I get loam from turf that's been thrown away in skips. So if I see some turf in a skip, I'll ask the person filling the skip, I say, can I have this turf? And they always say yes.
Yeah.
And then put that in piles, and it rots down over a few years, and then you can put that through a riddle or a sieve, and that lovely fine loam is mixed with leaf mold and garden compost, and makes a potting mix called a John Innes mix. And John Innes mix always contains a bit of soil, and you can plant tomatoes in that plant, whatever you like.
Excellent. Wow. Well, thank you very much. I think I've learned a lot from that, and I'm sure anyone who watches will learn an awful lot as well. So we'll say thank you and goodbye, and very appreciative of you sharing all of your knowledge and the information, and hopefully it will give people the courage to either start composting or do a little bit more than they already have, and start making a difference. But thank you ever so much.
We all need to do that.
We do, absolutely. Yeah.
Happy composting, folks.
Thank you ever so much. Cheers.